Hey guys, so I've been getting some questions recently about how my RODI unit works, things like the TDS flush valve, when do I use it, when do I change filters, and just how I maintain this thing. And since I needed to come on out here and get myself some RODI to fill back up my top off inside, I figure I'd take you out here and give you a quick tour. So the first thing I do, this thing is full, right? This is the freshwater RODI reservoir, and it operates on a float valve, so it's always filled to the top, which is great. But as soon as I start turn the valve and let some water out of there and start filling up my container, that float valve will trigger, and the RODI it'll turn off the auto shut-off valve and then start to filter water. So before I fill it, I want to come over here and turn this thing right here, which is the flush valve. So this thing, it took me a little while to figure this out, but basically what this is the wastewater line from the first stage, which is the actual RO membrane. And it never is fully closed, this valve. So when this thing's operating normally, as you probably know, there's still some water coming out the waistline. But when you turn this valve, you open that fully. So when it's closed, there's still a little bit of room for water to get out there. And then when you open this thing, open the flush valve, now lots of water can rush out there. So once water's been sitting around the actual RO membrane for a while, it collects all this TDS, which is total dissolved solids, right? And then once you activate the unit for the first time in a while, all those kind of concentrated dissolved solids will just rush out into your next stages and really just chew through your deionizing resin. So as a way to save resin and really just not have to change filters as often, it's really nice to have that flush valve. So, okay, I turn the valve. I'm looking here. This is my TDS meter, and it has two functions: before the DI resin and after. So if I look before, you can see that right now it's about 188, so not great, right? But since the flush valve is activated, I'll go ahead and fill up my container. By the way, I added these. It's great because you could just leave the container sitting on the ground. Okay, so while that's filling, first thing you notice is this has now activated. So the TDS meter, actually it's going up, which is kind of strange, but let's give that a sec. All right, so that's enough. There we go. So now you can see that is starting to run down. And so the water is not actually going into my container right now. Most of it's just running straight out the waistline. So that's a good thing. So while this is going down, let me just show you how this system works. So this is the bulk Reef Supply RODI 5-stage system. And I believe it's the plus or the, max or something like that. Basically, it just means it comes with some features. And I have to tell you, I considered whether to buy the premium version or not. Every single added feature it comes with, I use every single time. So don't skimp on this. You're gonna want these features, and I'll show you what they are. So, of course, you've got the flush valve comes with this model, and the auto stop, so you can use the float valve. The pressure gauge is great because it lets you know, right now I'm at about 42 psi, which is not bad, but it shows, usually that's actually closer to 50. So that's a great indicator that some of my filters might actually need a change in the not too distant future. So great reason to have that. The TDS meter, I don't know how you could run one of these things without it. It's just the best way to know if your filters are working, and lets you do this, you know, the flushing, right? So you have an intelligent way to do that. So you can see the TDS meters now reading 9 on the inlet water. So before it's gone through the final stage in the DI resin, and that's usually 8 or 9. That's usually low enough for me. So I go ahead now. Did you hear that? It made a sound kind of like a sink, because I closed it, but it only really half closes it. But it creates more back pressure, and check this out. Now the pressure is actually reading a bit higher, a few psi higher. It's almost 44 now. So now this water is running through the final stage, and if I flip this, you can see a clean, beautiful, 0 TDS, and I saved myself some resin because I flushed all that TDS creep. So now this is open, and it's actually running through, and it's going to refill the water that I just used and took to fill up my container. Let's see, last thing I just want to go through briefly is just how this system actually works, and then how often I change these filters. So I mentioned before, the inlet water comes, it starts by coming into the first stage, which is the actual RO membrane. This stage here, or the second stage, is a sediment filter. So you can get very fine filters, 1 micron, or save a little cash and get a 5 micron. I've done both. I don't know if there's much difference, but usually I opt for the 1. And you can actually see this starts out stark white. It's getting a little brown, which shows it's working, but also that might eventually need to replace that. The third stage, the water continuing down the line, is a carbon block. Same thing, you can get these in different kind of strengths, or kind of finer. And there's different qualities, but you know, bulk Reef Supply, they've got some really high quality ones. So it goes through there. Next stage, you guessed it, that's another carbon block. So you've got the 2 carbon filters, and now this is what makes a 5-stage RODI unit different from just an RO unit or a 4-stage RO, and that is this added beautiful container over here, which is the DI resin. So this, obviously, it pumps the resin, which helps to just strip the final TDS out. And I need this. Like in my water, it's not great, city water. You know, best of days, that's maybe 3 or 4, but completely 0 after it goes through the DI. So for me, a 5-stage is a minimum, maybe even a 6 or 7 by adding a 6 or 1 or 2 more DI chambers. But for now, this has been working pretty great. Okay, so the RO membrane, it's recommended to switch that really every 3 years or so, maybe 2.5 if you want to play it safe, but 3 years is kind of the standard. I've had this unit for almost 2, haven't replaced it. I feel like I have noticed this used to get down closer to like 2, so maybe it's time, but it's still working fine. The sediment, the carbon blocks, I tend to replace those all at the same time, and that's every 5 to 6 months is when I replace those. The DI resin. So this thing I actually change quite frequently. It is color changing, so you can tell when it's mostly tapped out. When it gets to the top and there's still a little blue, that's when I go ahead and replace that. It's not the funnest thing to do, but you know, I probably do it every 3 months. Probably every 3 months it pretty much is zapped out. So that's what I do there. All in all, I really like this unit. I think I sized it right for my mix station. BRS, it's just, man, it's a high quality product, and believe it or not, it was one of the more fun things for me when setting up my system was building this mix station, and hooking up that RODI. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully that gives you kind of a quick rundown on how these systems work, and then how you can plumb one of your own to make your own RODI water. Thanks.